Alright guys, well, we're going to cover a little bit of the material from Wednesday's class on this little video here, and because we're going to need all the time that we have for today, for Monday. So let's go ahead and get into it. So we're going to start here just looking at the forearm muscles, and we went through the labeling on the last slide at the end of class on Wednesday, and now we're just going to look at this slide here, which is the forearm overview. Okay, so all of the muscles in the anterior compartment are the flexor muscles. Okay, all four of them originate on the medial epicondyle of the humerus, which is an important thing to note and makes it easy, so you don't need to remember too many different origin sites here. And then all of these muscles are either innervated by the median nerve or the ulnar nerve. And we're not going to differentiate which muscle is innervated by which of those two nerves. Just know that the whole group is innervated by either the median or the ulnar nerve. And then the posterior compartment, these are all of your extensor muscles, okay? And these are innervated by the radial nerve. And just like in the lower leg, we have a thick fascia that separates these two compartments, okay? And this is just showing the compartments over here on the right. And as far as that question goes there, the flexor muscles, what are they flexing? They're flexing the forearm, flexing the wrist and the fingers, and then the extensors are extending the wrist and the fingers. Okay, moving on. Alright, so the first muscle in the flexor group is the flexor carpi radialis. Alright, so just as all of the flexor muscles do, this originates on the medial epicondyle, and it comes down to the base of the second and third metacarpal, so right in the wrist. Alright, so this is obviously a wrist flexor as well as a wrist abductor. Okay, so one thing that you're going to note is all of the two radialis muscles, the flexor carpi radialis as well as the extensor carpi radialis longus, they're both wrist abductors, abductors, that's shown right here. Okay, that's important to note. And then both of the ulnaris muscles are wrist adductors, adductors. Okay, that'll make it easier for you to remember. Alright, so the next flexor muscle is the flexor carpi ulnaris. Okay, so that means it inserts on the ulnar side of the wrist, and it inserts at the base of the fifth metacarpal. Okay, so this is on the anterior side of the wrist, and again it comes from the medial epicondyle, just like the rest of the flexors do. And like I said, since it's an ulnaris muscle, this is a wrist adductor, adductor, and this is the most medial of the wrist flexor muscles. Okay, then now we have the Pronator Teres muscle, which is completely different than the other muscles in this group. This has the same origination point on the medial epicondyle of the humerus, but instead of traveling straight down to the wrist, it crosses over the space between the radius and the ulna, and that's being shown right here, and it attaches down on the radius. Okay, and so when this shortens, if we're going to shorten this muscle, it is actually going to pull the radius over the ulna, which is also known as pronation. That's the movement in pronation. So it's mainly acting on this joint right here, which is the radio-ulnar joint, okay, which causes a pronation. It's also a weak elbow flexor because it crosses over the anterior side of the elbow, which would cause some elbow flexion. Okay, so it's a pronator teres muscle, very different than any of the other muscles that we're discussing in the wrist, because it acts as a pronator, not as a flexor or extensor. Okay, and then finally the last muscle here in the flexor group is the Palmaris Longus muscle. This is an interesting muscle, very, very small in humans, but it was very large in the cat. And this muscle is easy to pick up because it has a very small muscle belly, which is shown up here, and then this very long, prominent tendon. And this is the tendon that sticks out the most when you kind of make a gripping motion with your fingers. And interestingly enough, this one actually inserts on the palmar aponeurosis, which is the fascia in the palm. So it doesn't even actually insert onto bones. It inserts into the palm of the hand, actually onto the fascia there. And another interesting point about this muscle is it can be completely removed during surgery, and this can be used to replace the ulnar collateral ligament in the elbow if that's torn, and that's called Tommy John surgery. So they actually just take this tendon out and use that to replace the ulnar collateral ligament. And they figured they could do this because it's been known that about 15% of people don't even have this muscle in their body. So they figured if those 15% of people don't have it, then we can take it out in these guys too, and that seems to be fine. So that's Palmaris Longus. Okay, now moving on to the extensor muscles. Next we have the extensor carpi radialis longus. Okay, now one thing that's different about this muscle is it's the only one of the extensor muscles that doesn't originate from the lateral epicondyle. So think now we're on the posterior side of the forearm. The other extensor muscles originate on the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, just like all the flexors originate on the medial epicondyle. And this muscle actually originates above that on the proximal of the lateral epicondyle on the humerus. And easy way to remember that is it's the only one that has longus in its name, and it is actually longer than the other ones because it originates from a more proximal point than the rest of them. So you can see up here it originates all the way up here, whereas the other ones originate down in this area. Okay, so that's why it's called Radialis longus. Alright, and it goes down to the base of the second metacarpal, which is exact opposite side of the flexor carpi radialis. It originates on the base of the second metacarpal too, but on the anterior side. So this one's on the posterior side. And just as the flexor carpi radialis causes wrist abduction, so does the extensor carpi radialis longus, because they both go on the radial side of the wrist. Okay, so it's a wrist extender as well as a wrist abductor. Okay, then we have the extensor carpi ulnaris. So that's this smaller muscle shown here. Okay, comes down, starts on the lateral epicondyle, and originates there, and then goes down to the base of the fifth metatarsal. So opposite that of the flexor carpi ulnaris. So flexor carpi ulnaris is on the anterior side of the base of the fifth metatarsal. Extensor carpi ulnaris is on the posterior side of the base of the fifth metatarsal. Okay, and its actions are wrist extension, and then just like the flexor carpi ulnaris, it's a wrist adductor, wrist adduction. Okay, and then we have lastly we have the extensor digitorum, which is comes from the lateral epicondyle and comes out and splits into 4 tendons. And this is actually not really showing the fourth one, but there should be another tendon that comes down right here, because it goes to all the fingers and not the thumb. So the distal phalanges of 2 through 5, and its main action is finger extension. Okay. All right, and then just to summarize this here, as far as the origin goes, all of the flexor muscles that we talked about originate on the medial epicondyle of the humerus. So that's pretty easy. They all originate in the same spot, which can be problematic because it puts a lot of stress on that one part of the skeleton, and that leads to something called tennis elbow. Well, actually on the medial side it's called golfer's elbow because it's more by your flexors. And then all of the extensor muscles except for the extensor carpi radialis longus originate on the lateral epicondyle, and this is actually, if you get inflammation of the lateral epicondyle, that's actually called tennis elbow, and that's from doing a lot of backhand with tennis. And then the insertion point is important to think about because it's going to help us know what action it does. Okay, so obviously all the flexors originate on the anterior side, all the extensors on the posterior side. Now if they go to the lateral side of the wrist, meaning the thumb side or the radius side, that's going to mean that they are wrist abductors, abductors, meaning that the wrist moves towards the thumb or towards the radius side. Now if they insert on the medial side, which are going to be both of your ulnaris muscles, those are going to cause wrist adduction, and those are both your ulnaris muscles. So just to say that again, the insertion point for the lateral wrist, those are both of your radialis muscles, and then on the medial wrist, those are both of your ulnaris muscles. And then obviously the extensor digitorum is inserts on the fingers. And Palmaris longus, remember, inserts on that fascia in the palm of the hand. And then as far as the actions go, we have the ones that cause wrist and finger flexion. Those are your flexor muscles, obviously. Flexor ulnaris, carpi ulnaris, flexor carpi radialis, and then Palmaris longus. Okay, and then we have the extensor muscles, which are here, and obviously all of those cause wrist and finger extension. The only one that causes finger extension is the extensor digitorum, and so the key thing in this actions portion is really to look at the ones that insert on the lateral side or the thumb side are going to cause wrist abduction, and the ones that insert on the medial side or the ulna side are going to cause wrist adduction or adduction. And then there's one muscle that causes pronation in all of these, and that's right in the name, the Pronator Teres. So that pretty much wraps this up. All right, thanks guys.